Hello world and welcome to another episode of FooBar. In today's episode I want to talk about the new latest trigger for Lambda, SQS. So subscribe to my channel if you're interested in watching more content about serverless, cloud computing and software engineer practices in general. So let's get started! In today's video, I want to talk about triggering a Lambda with SQS. This is a feature that was launched like 2 weeks ago, and I want to do a tutorial using Serverless Framework and how to build everything as infrastructure as code. So, if you don't know what SQS is simple queue service. So that's a managed queue, and you can find the web page for all the information of the queue in the description box below. So queues are great for the coupling system. So instead of making one system to talk to another system, you make one system send messages to a queue and the other system to pick it up. So then you can replace the system A with anything and system B doesn't care. So that's what I think queues are very important part in the serverless architecture, because Lambdas are distributed, they are very decoupled, and you don't want a Lambda to talk to another Lambda, because if you change Lambda A, then Lambda B will need to change as well, and then you have a trigger of changes everywhere and it's explosion. You don't want that. So by putting queues between Lambdas, then you can make one Lambda talk to another Lambda in a very simple way. Today we are going to do that. We are going to have an API gateway that triggers a Lambda, and that Lambda will send a message to the queue, and this message will trigger another Lambda. So we are finally calling one Lambda from another Lambda in a clean, nice, decoupled, distributed way. If you don't have a clue what I'm talking about, I have created a playlist called Serverless 101, and there it starts from the very beginnings, and you should go and check it out. I'll leave you the card and in the description box the playlist. To get started with this, the first thing you need to do is update your serverless framework to the latest version, that is 1.28. Don't forget to do that, because that's when they merge the SQS support as a trigger event. So if you don't have your serverless framework updated, this would not work. And what we are going to do here, as I said, API gateway triggers Lambda, Lambda sends message to queue, queue triggers another Lambda. And everything is connected and works nice and totally as infrastructure as code. We are not going to console to do anything, just to see what we are doing, but that's for you to know what we are doing. So now let's go to the code and get started. So let's start our coding as always by creating a new directory where we will put our serverless project. You can find the code in GitHub as always. So let's make the new directory called SLS SQS test, and then we get in, and then there we create the serverless project. So SLS create --template, and then we put AWS Node.js, and then the name of the project that we want, that is SLS SQS test. That is the same of the directory. I always like to keep them in sync. And then we open this in Atom. We go to our serverless YAML and we clean a little bit this thing up. So we have let's comments and we can get started. So one thing that is important is to have updated your serverless framework to 1.28 or higher. If not, this won't work. Remember that. And then we go back to our serverless YAML and we put the runtime to 8.10, and then the profile. I just put provider. This will fail. So put profile if you have a different profile than the default. If you don't, then you just don't need to do anything. But it's profile, not provider. So the first thing we are going to do is to update the hello function to put an API gateway to it, and we are going to have an event that is hello and get to this function so it gets triggered, and then we are going to create a queue as a cloud formation in the bottom of our serverless YAML, and it's as easy as just defining there that you want a queue of type queue with the name my queue, or you can put any name you like. Then we go to our handler, and there we are going to modify the handler in order to send a message. So we want to use the AWS SDK that it comes by default in all the Lambda, so we don't need to install it in our package JSON. And then we are going to create a couple of constants like the account ID, that we are going to get it from our serverless YAML as an environmental variable. If you don't know what an environmental variable is, I'll leave you a link in the card. I will put just XXX, but you can find your account ID in your AWS console. And then we have our environment, so we know our environmental variables, we can access them. Then we will create this constance called QURL, and we are going to call it like that. Then we have the region. I was using Ireland, so important to change that if you're using something else. Then you have your AWS account ID that we just got from the environmental variables, and then they have the name of the queue. We can also use that as an environmental variable. We can make this as an environmental variable as a whole, this queue URL. We can compose it with all the environmental variables, but well, I just make it like this. But you can make it tighter if you're doing it for production. This is the queue URL where we are going to send the message. So queues has a URL where you send messages to, and we will see how that works. So first we are going to build these params that we are going to send to the queue. So the params has the message and the URL, and then we are going to remove this response that we have by default, and we are going to put all this code, and I will go through it. So the first part is the using the AWS SDK to send a message with SQS. So we will send a message with the params, basically the message and the URL. And if there is error, then we will just respond with a 500. And if there is no error, we will respond with the ID of the message that we just created and sent in the queue. One important thing is to add permissions to send messages to the queue. So you want to create in your serverless YAML an IAM role to get permissions to your queue. So let's do that, and that's as simple as adding the property IAM role statement with the effect allow and the action send SQS message to the queue that you want to send the message. Don't forget to add that, if not, then you will get an error when you run this Lambda that you don't have permissions on the queue. So good, now half of our things is done. The next thing we need to do is to create a Lambda that gets triggered whenever there is a message in the queue. And for that, we are going to create it in the serverless YAML first. We are going to create a SQS hello Lambda that will be triggered by an event, SQS event. And then we are using this CloudFormation get attribute, my queue, that is the one that we defined on the CloudFormation, and the batch size is 1. If you don't define anything, it's 10 by default, and I put 1, so whenever there is 1 message, this gets triggered. If not, it waits until there is 10 messages to process them in batch, or you can define as many messages as you want. I think the maximum is 10, but you can check the Serverless Framework documentation to know more about the batch size if they update it later, I don't know. So we will create another handler method in our handler.js, and this is going to be super simple, as just it will log that it was called, it will log the event, and then it will send done to the context. So now we can deploy. Everything is ready. Remember to put your account ID so it works, and then we deploy. And when it deploys, we can see that we have one endpoint and we have 2 functions. We can go to our AWS console and check in the right region that we have the queue created. If we go to the simple queue service in the region that we created this, we will be able to see the queue, and there we will see the queue URL, and we will be seeing if there is message available to be picked up. In our case, there is not yet. We can also see in the queue that there is a Lambda trigger with the Lambda that we created, the second Lambda, so that's good. We can run this in Postman, this URL that we get back, and we can see how everything connects. And we can also activate the logs, so we can see that the message is triggered in this other Lambda. SLS logs -f, SQS hello, the name of the function, -t. And now we can go to Postman and we can run this URL. We trigger the Lambda that is triggered by the API gateway, and this will send a message to the queue, and will trigger the other Lambda that is going to print something in the console now. And yes, it does. It was called, and we can see that the body is hola, and everything looks great. So that's very simple way to trigger a Lambda from another Lambda. This is the video for today. I hope you like it. If you did, give a big thumbs up. And if you have any questions, comments, or things you would like to see in the following episodes, let me know in the comment box below. I always like to make videos that you want to watch. And around here, as always, there are other videos from my channel for you to watch. And if not, I see you in the next episode of FooBar. Ciao, ciao!